Today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers on the Varsity Podcast Network is brought to you by Varsity Search. Varsity Search specializes in helping small law firms in Texas hire lawyers and build great teams. So if you're thinking of making a move or your law firm is looking to hire, please go to varsitysearch.com and book a time to visit right into my calendar. Varsity Search, building great teams. Hey everyone, Daniel here back with you on Lone Star Lawyers. I hope you and your family are both healthy and safe. Now, before we get into this episode, I want to remind you that Varsity Search has been retained by a general practice firm in the Dallas-Fort Worth area to help them grow their family law team. So, if you value inclusivity, teamwork, diversity, humility, and cost-effective client service, and you have 2 years of family law experience at least, we want to hear from you. So you can email me at daniel@varsitysearch.com, or you can go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers to get more information and apply. All right, today we stay home in Waco for a conversation with Professor Elizabeth Fraley. Professor Fraley is an associate professor of law and co-director of the Executive LLM in litigation management at Baylor Law School, where she teaches in the renowned practice court program. Prior to joining the law school in 2015, she had a successful trial practice in Dallas, where she focused on medical malpractice, professional licensing, and business and commercial disputes. And she has tried more than 50 civil jury trials. All right, with that, let's hop into our conversation with Professor Elizabeth Fraley on today's Monday Mentors episode of Lone Star Lawyers. All right, Liz Fraley joins us now, professor at Baylor Law School. Professor Fraley, thanks for coming on the show today.
Happy to be asked, Daniel. Thank you.
Yeah, it's good to see you again. And I want to start off by talking with you about how COVID-19 has impacted, obviously, the law school and law students and your classes. You're the first professor we've had on here, so you get to kind of take the first whack at this from that side of it. So just obviously, things started in mid-March, and that class of 2020 especially, rolling through those last 6 weeks. How did that go? What was that like? And just share your perspective a little bit on that.
So I was probably the only person at my hotel in Maui who was up at 4 a.m. to be attending a virtual faculty meeting.
Oh, gosh.
Because that was Thursday morning and we were preparing to go all remote teaching that Monday morning.
Yeah.
You know, we at Baylor were very fortunate in a couple of regards. First, several of us had been teaching remotely in our Executive LLM program for more than a year. So we had some institutional knowledge. Yeah. Second, we have got an amazing IT department. You want to talk about some gentlemen who jumped in ready full scale to teach some professors who maybe hadn't had that on our syllabus. And then the third, I think, is just the nature of Baylor Law. We are very willing to adapt and change given the situation. And so we actually could have delayed another week. And instead, at least in practice court, the program in which I teach, we went from the Friday of spring break to, okay, we're online Monday morning and didn't miss a beat. So yeah. The willingness to transition was very strong. We really have learned a tremendous amount about Zoom technology. That's definitely my preferred medium for teaching.
Yeah.
And we've gotten really proficient with the different input options for sharing documents. I have a very cool little document camera that plugs into the USB port. So I have my own little Elmo at home, yeah. And I can show documents and do hypotheticals. And then our students were very willing to become technological innovators. We really threw them the challenge of, okay, you are now doing all your advocacy via Zoom, make it better. And so it's been a very steep learning curve,
Right.
but really a great place for people to showcase creativity and innovation.
That's really cool. And I'm not surprised to hear that is how things came about over these last few months. And now, of course, we're recording this. People will hear this later, obviously. And it's July 9th as we are talking right now. We're just days removed from this Texas Supreme Court announcing the in-person bar exam postponement. And I know you've worked over the years closely with those that are preparing for the bar exam. Talk about that a little bit and what the plans are for those students getting ready for what now might be either September or October online or in-person bar exams.
Yeah, while I sympathize with the Supreme Court and their concern for public safety in light of the COVID spike, I mean, we have known about this since March.
Right. And
I am disappointed that the state was not more proactive about an online opportunity.
Yeah.
All the rest of the world had to move to online. So why did we have this little nucleus of the bar examiners who weren't? I fault them a bit for not being more proactive.
Right.
It has naturally injected yet another bit of uncertainty for this group of students, and my heart really goes out to them. But I got on a call with them Friday as within 5 minutes of the order coming out and just talked through some of the skills and strategies. Everyone said, take the weekend off. If there ain't anything you need to do, it's July 4th. Go have a holiday.
Right.
And then in my own inimitable PC professor way, I said, and use that time to get over it. I know you're mad. I know you're unhappy. I know you are all those things and they're totally valid. And guess what? I don't think anyone on the Supreme Court Board of Law Examiners is sitting up saying, oh my gosh, Liz Fraley disapproves of my action. I'll never sleep again.
Right.
And it's probably the same for you. And so we talked through that there are times in practice and in life where you are handed a significant disappointment and you've got to figure out a way forward. Yeah. And so now we still don't have clarity on how things are going to work. I do think that there is a genuine attempt to do the right thing vis-a-vis these students.
Right.
One answer that I know we have gotten is that if you sign up for the September exam and it is not able to be given in person, you will have the choice to default to October or February. But I think it really puts our bar takers in a world of hurt, both in terms of their ability to start employment that had a deadline.
Yeah.
To seek employment. Our students who want to be prosecutors will not have their bar results when they had hoped. And I think there's just a cumulative psychic weight of, what next, 2020? What next?
Yeah, seriously. I know that you all in practice court especially really try to throw just about everything at the students so that they are ready for what practice is going to be like. And 2020 may have actually won up to you guys.
I don't know. I think we've really outdone ourselves with this one. You should see what we have for the fall class.
Okay, I've been asking about the fall class, but there is a summer class at Baylor. And did they start as scheduled in May, or were they pushed back? And kind of how has it just been business as usual in terms of obviously online learning, but has that continued? We delayed their start 1 week. Okay. Yeah.
Just to nail some things down about how things were going to happen. This was the first time we had to do an online orientation. And so there were just a few logistical things that we felt like would be better handled. Honestly, our numbers for summer enrollment, for fall enrollment are where they've been before. So we are not seeing the effect of COVID-19 yet on enrollment. The other thing that I think the summer class had the benefit of, part of what was difficult, I think, for the students enrolled in the spring, was that you started in one world, and much like Dorothy, you woke up and thought, we are not in Kansas anymore,
right.
Toto. At least with people who enrolled for the summer, you already sort of knew the parameters that came with being in school with COVID, that you were not going to be having in-person classes, that there would be restrictions. And so going forward, at least we're not throwing that variable at them.
Yeah, that's true. They were kind of ready and prepared for any and all ways that they were going to learn that summer. And then in the fall, I guess probably walking down both roads of, will we come back and be in person? Very well ready to be able to go online as soon as we have to, right?
The university has had a very clear directive that education should be in person where possible. And we certainly are preparing for that. I mean, there are challenges because you've got people who do not believe they can safely participate with in-person learning. You know, in our program, we are fully prepared. We've made all kinds of we've spent a lot of time looking at how we can intentionally give them an in-person experience. The place I've spent a lot of time is, how do we get back to a courtroom in-person experience?
Right.
Because I'm fairly comfortable that with Zoom, the classroom piece can be effectively communicated. Is it the same as having Jerry Powell stand right in front of you and stare you down? Probably no.
Right.
But is it still effective? I still see little student hands shaking over the Zoom camera. So, we're
right.
doing something right.
Yeah.
But the classroom piece, where you're really integrating the physical, the verbal, nonverbal messaging, teaching them how to move, we're very hopeful that we can still do that piece irrespective of what happens. Yeah. And you're right. I think life for the foreseeable future is, and we pull the plug as need be for safety reasons.
Yeah, 100%. Absolutely. I mentioned earlier that you are the first professor that we've had on here. And one of the reasons why I approached you specifically is because you, before becoming a professor, were a practicing lawyer, trial lawyer for years and years. And you've continued to do that even alongside your duties as a full-time professor. How you managed to do all that, I don't really know. But as most of our listeners are practicing lawyers, and I want to kind of turn to them a little bit now, thinking through what, as we've gone through this now kind of adjustment to utilizing more and more technology, not just in the legal education setting, but in the legal profession as practicing lawyers, what have you seen or what are you hopeful of in terms of things that will become part of just the way we do business as practicing lawyers moving forward that'll be a positive to the practice of law?
Well, I do believe that this is going to be a really good jumpstart for the profession. I mean, when you think back to 2012, the ABA mandated technological competence with lawyers. We're supposed to have been maintaining that.
Right.
And then 35 states in the District of Columbia said, yes, ethically, this is part of your responsibility. And there has really been very little attention paid across the profession to doing that. Mm-hmm. And I think we've missed some very key opportunities for clients. I think we've missed some efficiency opportunities. I think in terms of encouraging gender equality, having more remote practice options available may actually help some of that.
Yeah.
And so I think all of that is going to help. I think now that we've forced people to see that you can do Zoom depositions or Teams depositions or even mediation. I have a really good friend who's a mediator, and I said, okay, what has this done to your business? He said, well, I had 2 days canceled, And then the third day, people said, well, let's give it a try. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work. And what they found was it actually works really effectively. And so we're going to see cost savings at a time when clients are facing, I mean, I don't know if we're officially to recession or not,
right,
but we are certainly hurting economically. All of that to me is positive.
Yeah.
The piece that gives me heartburn is the idea of remote jury trials. Now, let me say, I'm being a complete hypocrite because I've just made an entire practice court class do remote jury selection and then try their case remotely to that very same jury that they picked over the internet.
Right.
But my concern is that this feels a lot like a TV show. And that if I were accused or had a loved one accused of a crime that could result in jail time and the loss of my ability to vote, the loss of someone's life, I have due process concerns that we can do that in a meaningful and appropriate way. And while those due process concerns are mitigated somewhat in the civil setting, I am still concerned that some of the things we can monitor at the courthouse, both in terms of the jurors' conduct vis-a-vis following the rules and instructions we give them, and in truly watching them. I don't get to see full body language on a Zoom call. I don't know who else is in the room. If somebody's got earbuds in, I don't know who else is talking to them. And so I do have some concern. Groups like ABOTA have been very intentional about trying to preserve our right to jury trial because I don't want to wait 2 years before we see a jury trial. We are trying at Baylor to do some things to develop best practices that we can share with judges and lawyers. But it giveth and it taketh away.
Well, you raised some really interesting and good points about the due process issues and rights of jury trial that will inevitably be coming as we try to open things back up in the judicial or in the courthouse and all of that for sure. Well, one other just hot topic or in the kind of current state of things that I wanted to ask you about, and particularly with the role of lawyers, is just the issue of racial justice and within the legal process, especially where a lot of this has originated, obviously, with police and with criminal either prosecutions, arrests, detainments, all those things. And just thinking through, as a young lawyer especially, most of our audience are young lawyers, how they should be thinking through or things that they ought to be thinking about when it comes to this issue as they maybe look at their career choices or within their firm or their pro bono efforts or anything along those lines, just as the role of the lawyer in these times when it comes to this issue.
I mean, I think racial equity it has been cast aside for an unthinkably long time. And I'm grateful that we finally seem as a nation to be meaningfully looking at it. And goodness, Daniel, we've managed to systematically discriminate well beyond the confines of the criminal justice system.
Sure.
We've systematically discriminated in a lot of places.
Yeah.
So for young lawyers, I think the challenges are multifaceted. For many of us, we carry biases that we really aren't even aware of. And there's a lot of work out there about implicit bias. Judge Tanya Parker in Dallas has done some very meaningful work on implicit bias and jury service. Mm-hmm. And so I think it becomes important to educate yourself about implicit bias, about racial history, because I can believe myself to be as empathetic as I want. I have never been a teenage black man.
Yeah.
I have not been a mother who has had to teach my son what to do if the police pull over, but for fear that they might be killed.
Yeah.
And so I think educating ourselves is a big component of that. I also think that a lot of the discussion of the topic is being conducted in a way that is not likely to lead to consensus. I think people, and social media is certainly terrible about this, choose to polarize the issues into extremes that are ridiculous.
Right.
You know, the whole Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter debate to me is just a fallacy. If my house burns down, the answer is not, well, but other people have lost homes in a hurricane. Yeah, I mean, both are true, but that's not where we draw the argument.
Right.
And I think that lawyers can be really good in guiding civil discourse about this.
Yeah. Right.
While racial discrimination needs to stop, I think it is fair to have a conversation about when we pull down statutes that applying today's view of people, is that a fair lens?
Right.
Okay, that is a discussion that we can have. How do we safely allow police to do their very important job in a way that does not discriminate against a racial group, a gender group? We need people who can facilitate those discussions, or we won't get to meaningful outcomes. And so the ability to civilly disagree and to recognize the merits of both sides are things that lawyers are uniquely situated to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you for that and for sharing. It'll be interesting to see, how lawyers play the role in this moving forward. Well, I do want to ask you, I mentioned it a little bit ago about your practice and your history within your law firm that you had for years. Tell us what type of law you practiced, what you did, and some of the things maybe even that you are continue to work on. I know you're kind of winding it down some, as you mentioned before.
Yeah. I had a trial practice for 30 plus years. A big part of that was in the healthcare litigation space, trying lawsuits for doctors and hospitals that had been sued. I also, kind of in the last 10 years before I joined the faculty, had kind of a cool niche where people would come to me and say, we've mostly worked this case up. We just really need somebody to try it. And so I tried all kinds of different things, construction cases, fire losses, things that weren't necessarily in my wheelhouse, but where they wanted somebody who could look at all of the leaves that were out there and then kind of say, here's the forest.
Yeah.
And that was great fun.
Yeah.
And so that was neat.
Yeah.
I've continued to practice, and I have started winding it down. I talked to a number of my clients last year and said, look, if you chase two rabbits, you won't catch either one. And it's time for me to stop chasing two rabbits full steam. I mean, my heart and my passion are teaching at Baylor.
Yeah.
And so, but there is validity in having a practice court professor who is current, relevant, and trying cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the balance for me is to continue being relevant, doing work that I find meaningful. The other thing that I have agreed to do is mentor younger women trial lawyers.
Oh, awesome. Yeah.
There are cases that the client gets really, really nervous about giving to somebody who doesn't have as much gray hair as I do. And so I have stayed on in a handful of cases saying, let this very talented woman work it up.
Yeah.
And I will be there for advice and consent. I will be there, if I need to do a specific piece, and then I will go to trial with them.
That's awesome.
But we've got to give the next generation a chance, or we're not going to have trial lawyers.
Right. Absolutely. Well, so two questions that I've got after hearing you talk about that. Number one, are you taking new mentees as the women listeners in the audience? Which we can cut that out if you're not, but I want to ask you about that. And then also the role that you have or that you had in taking over cases that had been worked up and just trying them. I'm wondering, there might be some interesting nuggets for people that are young trial lawyers, young litigators, in terms of what you saw in those files where you thought, hey, this was really been worked up very, very well. This is ready for someone to try versus, oh, I'm gonna have to pick up some pieces here, or there's some missing, there's some holes in this. We got to shore up before we take this forward. So I'm curious about both those.
Sure. Am I taking new mentees? Yes, on a very limited basis. Okay. And here's why. I really am trying to take women who have a good background already and move them to a higher level. Yeah. I mean, my work taking people who have very little trial experience and getting them better, I call practice court.
Right.
And that's
and you can apply to Baylor Law at this website. We'll put it at the bottom of it.
That's exactly right. I do jury consulting, focus groups. I am available to talk to you about getting your themes in right. But I really am specializing in the women who've been in practice for 10 or 15 years, who need to move up to that more sophisticated level.
Yep.
As for the other, it is astonishing to me the number of people who will bumble through a file without a plan. Yeah. It's like leaving the house on a long road trip and you have no idea if your car's in working order, if you have gas, or, where you're going. So the people who I've seen do well are the ones where they pretty clearly had a plan. They started with a true understanding of the legal elements that needed to be proved, whether they were the plaintiff or the defendant. What are my causes of action? What are the essential elements of my claim? What's the standard that my experts are going to have to apply? What's my damage model? I'm amazed at people like, I've got the best case, and they go off on liability. I go, okay, and what are your damages? They're like,
oops.
Well, not so much.
Right.
Yeah. You got to have it all together. And so I think the best cases are the one when somebody has taken the time up front to do an early case assessment and to think through, what do I have to prove? How am I going to prove it? And to have a plan. Now, the best laid plans of mice and men. But you can adapt better if you have a plan than if you really haven't thought through it at all.
Yeah, that's really good. In fact, it reminds me, people go back, if they remember, we interviewed Wesley Lotz, who's a Baylor lawyer, litigator in Houston. And one of the things he said he most looks for or appreciates in young lawyers is someone who can quickly identify and do a full case assessment, just along the lines of what you just said. And so I think that's really good to come back and hit that hard, because I think that is a skill, and sometimes that maybe doesn't get prioritized or doesn't get talked about as much, but it does have a big impact. Well, I do want to, in the few minutes that we have left, talk a little bit about hiring lawyers, because obviously at the not your current role at the law school, but over the course of time in practice, you've hired associates and lawyers over those years. Tell us a little bit about what you really looked for, either on paper or in the interviews, in terms of things that stood out from a positive standpoint that you're really wanting to find, things maybe that were red flags that may not be obvious to people.
I had a strong hiring bias in favor of Baylor lawyers because I knew the training. Yeah. And I mean, years before being a professor was ever on my radar, my standard would be to call Jerry Powell and say, okay, you know who I am and what I do. I need some help, because unlike big firms, small to mid-sized firms are opportunistic hirers.
Yeah, that's right.
They go looking for help when they need help.
Right when they need it. That's right.
Yeah. And so the good news is you're not going to wait a long time because they've gotten to the point they're desperate.
Yeah.
The bad news is you don't know what's going to be available.
Right.
So I liked knowing and having the connection of somebody whose training I knew to be what I was already going to need, because the other part of a busy trial practice is it is very hard to take the time to train up a young lawyer who doesn't have any practical skills.
Yes. Right.
It just is.
Yeah.
I really liked people who came into the interview prepared. I hired Courtney Bose-Huber several years ago out of Baylor. And I remember very clearly, it was the day of the West explosion. And I was driving down and sent a message saying, I'm going to be a little late. There's some delay on I-35.
Gosh.
And I got there, and she was my first interview. And so I kind of did my spiel and asked her some questions. And then I said, now, do you have any questions for me? And she flipped open a legal pad and had 2 pages of very thoughtful questions. And they were questions asked by somebody who had both looked into me and my firm and who had thought about where she wanted to be.
Right.
And that told me a lot about her as a potential lawyer. Number one, she had done her homework, and I'm a believer in doing your homework. Sure. Number two, she had thought about what she wanted. And I think that is so important. I'm always a little skeptical when somebody is making a big life decision about like a job in your profession. Yeah. And I say, do you have any questions? And the answer is like, no, I'm good. I mean, I am not that good an interviewer.
No. Right.
It's like going out on a date and going, okay, well, yeah, that's enough. I guess let's get married.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah.
No.
Right. That's really good. Well, and, I'm glad that you mentioned it, and good for Courtney. Because those opportunities for the candidate to ask questions, I think may be the most critical moments in many ways of the interview. Obviously, the first impression is important, and many things happen based off the first impression. But that opportunity to ask questions can really share a lot, because I know when I'll do mock interviews with candidates, or back when I would do it with students, oftentimes the questions were very process oriented, right? Like, when are you going to make a decision? How many people are you interviewing? All of which are completely irrelevant to anything of substance with the firm, the job, or anything like that. And so someone that can really, show off their preparation, but also their interest in that specific firm and that role, with the questions that they ask, can really set themselves apart, I've found.
And I think what you get back is really important too.
Yeah.
I think, if you get this job, this is how your days are going to go. Yeah. You're going to be having conversations with this lawyer, this partner. And one of the things I want to know is, do we communicate well together?
Right.
Do we, when you talk, and let's face it, we all go into an interview situation, a date situation, trying to showcase our best possible selves.
Oh, of course. All right.
And sometimes when you get into a conversation, the facade can flake off a little bit. Yep. And you get a sense of what's behind it.
Right.
And you want to know, is this just veneer or is this solid wood?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's great stuff. Liz, we've got just a couple minutes to hit you with our rapid fire questions to end our time. But I want to say thank you so much for taking the time to be with us. And I hope you'll come back again one day. I could talk to you for hours about all of this stuff. And you have so much information and experience and knowledge, and just a great perspective. So thanks for being here.
Thank you. I'm glad to talk to you, Daniel.
All right. So here are our rapid fire questions. Name one trait or characteristic that you most want to see in an associate.
Preparedness.
Good. What habit has been key to your success?
Early riser.
There you go. Favorite app or productivity tool?
Oh, it's like asking me to choose a favorite child. Probably the remote working platform that I use, because it lets me do both my jobs and access it from a single location, which right now is feeling even more important.
For sure. Your favorite social distancing activity? What have you been up to these last few months?
Gosh, lots of them. Probably kayaking.
Oh, nice. Yeah. So you do that down at the river?
More on the lake, because nobody has to come get me.
Gotcha.
I have some friends, we all have inflatable kayaks. So you blow them up with your little inflator in your car, pop them in the lake, paddle around. We like to go mostly sunrise, and it lets you talk and be outside. And I don't know about you, right now I value a change of scenery.
For sure. Yeah, absolutely. No, I just walked outside my office yesterday to a place I had not been before and found there's a little gazebo not far away, and I had never been there. But yeah, just went down there for like 30 minutes just to kind of get that change of scenery. Just it really is important right now. All right, lastly, your favorite legal movie?
Drama, To Kill a Mockingbird, comedy, Legally Blonde.
Nice. Good combination. Good combination. Well, Liz, thank you again for being here. We really appreciate you taking the time.
Absolutely. Stay well.
All right. My thanks again to Professor Liz Fraley for joining us on the show today. If you enjoyed this episode, would you consider doing two things for me? Would you subscribe so you don't miss an episode? And then would you also rate and review the podcast, either in iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts? If you have suggestions or thoughts about the show, or if I could help you in any way, please email me directly, daniel@varsitysearch.com. Also, don't forget, if you or someone you know might have interest in a family law opportunity in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can either email me or you can go to varsitysearch.com/lawyers. All right, that's it for today's episode of Lone Star Lawyers. Thanks again so much to each of you for listening. I'm Daniel Hare with Varsity Search, and we'll talk with you next time.